I have Diane with me today. Um, and we were just chit-chatting for a few minutes before we started to record. We are both therapists in New York, which is a unique place to be, which we'll get into maybe a little bit here today. But we met on social media, which has been a really cool journey of mine. I'm sure yours too, where I feel like in this last year, I've really started to network and get to know just remarkable women who are doing amazing things in this world and leaving their little imprint. Um, and legacy behind. And so today, I want you to share with us who you are, what you do, all the goodness that you are leaving this world. So,
Okay, thanks, Erin. Glad to be here. Glad to be connected to you. It's great to meet another therapist in New York, like you were saying.
yeah.
Um, first of all, I'm a mom of three, and that's like the vast majority of my life right now, three boys. Um, and Being a therapist, I specialize in trauma. I also have a business partner, and we have expanded into somewhat large private practice in the Capital District area of New York. And whereas I'm a trauma therapist, we have therapists at our practice, which is called With Grace Mental Health Counseling, that represents pretty much every specialty that there is. I think the only specialty we don't have represented is in OCD. But we have people that work with couples, kids, um, maternal mental health, anxiety, sports related anxiety, anything you can think of. And we have someone that specializes in it pretty much. Recently, for myself, what I mean by recently is perhaps maybe in the past few years, I started specializing in helping trauma survivors to clear blocks that were preventing them from manifesting what they wanted to happen in their lives. And I've been really enjoying that work lately. So
Amazing.
that's an introduction to me. Yeah.
So cool. And so a mom of three boys. So I have two boys, and I feel like that's 100 kids. So adding a whole nother, a whole nother realm of human testosterone is like a whole other thing. And then we have a male dog and I have a husband. So it's just like so much energy.
It is.
Male energy.
I love being a mom of three. It opens your heart in a way that you don't expect. But I will say, I keep saying this like to anyone that will listen, pretty much. I'm like, you go from two and all of a sudden you have a whole football team. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, so you go from two and then it feels like so many, when you add one more. But our youngest is 9 months, and so he's still an infant. And as you know, that there's so much of everything that it's more work, but it's also like more snuggles, more happiness, more, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's magnified when they're babies.
Magical for your older ones too, to like pass that, down and just like be a part of the growth of the baby. Like it's so fun to see, my oldest, which is like wild. So he's 12 and my youngest is going to be 9 in a couple months. And it's just like a wild experience to see where this is going and their like bond that's growing. But when they were so little, they were like, my oldest was just such a little, like another little parent. It's so cute to watch that stage and then
It
grow.
is. Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful parts about parenting is seeing the emotional growth and the care that they have for each other. Like 100%. It's really sweet.
Yeah. So cool. And this time of year is so fun, I'm sure. The magic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that has probably played such a part for you in building, growing, launching your own business to be able to really set your schedule, set your life around your family, which is such a cool aspect. I know that was such a huge part of why I chose to step out on my own was because I wanted that freedom and that control of what I'm making, what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, which can be really hard as an entrepreneur, but as a mom, it gives you a little bit more flexibility and freedom to sort of choose how that looks. So, such,
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that aspect of it. My business partner is also a mom of three. she has three girls. So it's kind of funny how we are
Funny.
like that. And many of our employees are mothers themselves. And we have one of the values that we built the whole business upon was quality of life and good work-life balance. So all of our employees, they make their own schedule. They do aside from that, they decide when they're going to work and they do all their scheduling so they can plan it around their family life. We really are big on that and huge proponents of it. And so we really put the control on our employees about what that looks like so that they can really enjoy the journey of motherhood and being a parent as much as possible.
Yeah. And not giving up their passion, right? And their
Mhm.
purpose in this, which is so huge. I know I've worked with so many women. I did a whole series of being a mom and an entrepreneur and a high level executive woman. And it's CEO mom style is what I kind of called it. And so it's a whole nother breed of us of how to balance that, which is such an illusion, right? But so cool. I love that. I love that we're so parallel. So tell my world a little bit more about specific to your niche and what you do on the work side, not just the mom side, but on the work side, and how that developed, how that has evolved, and why you kind of started to navigate towards that niche.
Sure. So I've been doing trauma work pretty much my whole career. But the niche in terms of creating a new chapter after trauma and what a lot of people would call manifestation, that started because I was helping a lot of survivors of emotional abuse or DV. And I really, in working alongside them so much, you can see that the experience of going through abuse and the changes in their brain and the patterning that happened at a neurological level would often prevent, there would be like a block or a pattern that would prevent starting something new, what they wanted for themselves, right? And so it was a very clear pattern after so many years of walking alongside people and helping these men and women create a new chapter after an abusive relationship. It was very predictable at a certain point. And what I mean by that is the traumatic experience would lead to what we call fear circuitry. So in the brain, there is on a neurological level a patterning of scarcity, of fear, of wanting to hide instead of taking risks, right? So this is just one example because there's all different types of fear circuitry, and often, the fear circuitry can express itself differently depending on what type of traumatic event it was. And so once you were able to see that link and actually help people to create new internal norms deep in their brain chemistry, right? Then they were able to open up the ability to create new experiences for themselves and that new chapter that they really want after the abusive relationship. So it was really working with abuse survivors that helped me to understand the link between trauma and manifestation. I've always really been against like healing just for the sake of healing. And what I mean by that is in some parts of the industry, when I say the industry, I mean in psychotherapy and mental health, there can be like a very symptom oriented way of doing things. Like you go to therapy because you want to have, let's say from a trauma perspective, less nightmares or less intrusive thoughts, or you want to be less anxious, right? But for me, and I think there's a lot of us that you go to therapy to improve your quality of life in general, or you go to therapy to be able to have a really satisfying relationship, or to really enjoy your work life, or to be the best parent that you always knew you could be, right? So it's not just symptom reduction, you're doing it for a purpose, a greater purpose, right? And so when my clients work with me, it always starts with, well, what do you want your life to look like? Right. So it's not what trauma symptoms do you want to reduce? It's what do you want your life to look like post trauma? And so that kind of naturally lended itself for me to really focusing on manifestation, which is a lot of what I'm doing today is blending psychotherapy with manifestation.
Amazing. I love it. And that's really it's such a key element, I think, that is maybe missed. I mean, we were sort of talking about the differences between sort of private practice and being able to create your own way of providing a service, right? Where in some of a clinic setting that might be more regulated in the public side, there's a lot of check the boxes and things that you have to do. There's certain things that you have to discuss and it's got to be a certain way. There's criteria, all the things where, yes, that is still relevant in the private side, but you can really dive into things a little bit different. And I love that part too, because I do a lot of patterns work, which you're speaking to, of sort of taking that spider web and like unraveling all the patterns that have been created from trauma in your case of what you're dealing with, right? And sort of saying, okay, like how can we recreate a new life? How can we really visualize what we want and vision cast the future, which is I think a piece that does get lost in straight therapy, where it's what you're speaking to is you came in here for this thing, let's fix this thing, where there's actually so many layers to it, where if we unrooted some of those patterns and reworked them, there can be such remarkable change. So I love that part.
Yeah, it's interesting. In America today, there's so much criticism about healthcare in general and specifically to mental health. But what we do have in the United States is a humongous diversity in services, which I always say is necessary, right? So there are the more, clinic-based type services or intensive day treatment services or inpatient services. And there's places like with Grace Mental Health and an outpatient practice or a private practice where there might be more flexibility, but it's all about a time and place and what someone needs for where they are right now. So if a toolbox only had a hammer, right, it wouldn't be very useful. And similarly in mental health, we have all kinds of different services for different needs, right? And sometimes in the trauma recovery process, there could be a time and place when someone really, it would be best for them to focus specifically on symptom reduction to improve their initial functioning after what happened, right? To help them with just the day-to-day coping and feeling better. In general, right? So if someone's not sleeping because of nightmares, right? We're definitely going to zero in on those nightmares, right? In order to help them to get better sleep. So they're functioning overall, feeling better, feeling more energized, feeling more positive. Um, there's like 1,000 ways to cut a cake, but at the end of the day, it's really important that providers are looking at the person in front of them in a very, very specific way that's tailored to what they're going through, what they need. There's definitely not like a one size fits all to any of this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that's such a good point that, we need all of it because people are in various different stages of their journey, which is important to be able, and it's our job, right, to be able to recognize because they don't have the tools at that point to say, oh, this is exactly what I need. It's our job to say, okay, you're not quite in a place to be able to work on the manifesting because we have to be able to at least have a baseline of being able to do that work. If somebody's still engaging in a relationship that's unhealthy, they're not necessarily going to be able to see that there's a vision past this. So we've got to sort of get them to that place to be able to do this work, which is so important to recognize on our part. So you bring up a good point.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. So for maybe some of the aspiring therapists or providers out there that are either in college or um, looking to get into grad school to do this work, or they are, in their clinicals now and sort of figuring this all out and not sure. Tell us about your journey and where that began and how you landed in being, a CEO of this beautiful, thriving practice.
So, you know, therapy, a lot of therapists like knew they wanted to be therapists, and I I actually would say that's not the case for me. I knew that I wanted to be in the helping field in some capacity, and whether that meant being an attorney or a woman's advocate or a therapist, I really wasn't sure about that. But when I was in college, I started taking psychology classes, and that led to, a graduate degree in counseling. And so I did kind of like tripped and fell into being a therapist, honestly. Um, and I do really love it. What I say to younger therapists or people that are in college or grad school is know that it's a labor of love in the beginning, before you're licensed. It can be harder to find a job in the beginning. Um, and certainly a lot of the jobs in the beginning of this career are not particularly well-paying jobs, and they
Yeah.
might be on the dangerous side of things. So you really have to make sure that you're in it because you love working with people on their journeys. And it's interesting because like it's a career that the longer you're in it, the more you're rewarded, you know? So some of the hardest years are in the beginning, which I think can be a little bit backwards, you know. But that is how it is for us. So like that's like my number one tip is just like know what you're getting into, and like the path to getting licensed can sometimes be difficult, with very long hours. And some of my hardest experiences to navigate as a therapist happened in the very beginning of my career without the experience that I have now, you know. And when if people are down for that, it's a very rewarding career. It's rewarding in terms of the work is beautiful. You couldn't ask for a better thing to devote your life for than to help people on their journeys, and to help people expand to the most happiest, fulfilled version of themselves, right? Um, and also, you get to choose your schedule, especially as a private practice therapist. There's so much flexibility. So, as a mother, it's been a godsend to be in this career where I have the flexibility to pick and choose the days that I work around my kids' schedule. Because I really love being an active mom. I love being involved in their sports and what they're doing, and not missing any of that.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important. It's so important to have that. I mean, I always say, and I've had a bunch of interviews lately with CEO level moms that we're never balanced. Like it's such an illusion. Just when we think we are, we're we're not. But there is this sort of piece about choosing when we choose to work versus when we choose to be present for our kids, and there's just this like piece that we don't have to be forced to, oh, I have to go to work and miss this, or I have to do. There's a level of flexibility there that I think is, if you can, like you're saying, if you can kind of be game for knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel and putting yourself in the beginning stages of like, okay, I've just got to get through this and sort of had this drive to know what can be on the other side. It is a beautiful place to land. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, what would you say then was sort of, I know you kind of like, I was very similar to you in that I sort of tripped and fell into this side of things. I think it's funny that we're aligned on that too, that I originally was in school to do something completely different, but was in psychology and took a social work 101 class because that was a prereq, right? And so I was like, oh, I really love this stuff. And there it was, it sort of like navigated its way through. So it's interesting. But I think there is sort of times where you have a case or a client or something specific, a specific role or job that pushed you to the limit that was that catalyst of like, I'm going to get through this and I'm going on the other side, going to really thrive from this. And I mean, for me, there's a couple instances I can think of, but what do you think for you may have been either a position, a role, a job, a situation that in your career occurred that really was this like push for you to get to where you are?
Hmm. I think that for me, I guess like sometimes it's still surprising to me. I've been trained in every single evidence-based trauma treatment that exists. Um, and time is kind of funny because the older that you get, the more time contracts a little bit. So it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has been 2 decades. So I would say that, for me, it's been about the pain that trauma survivors go through, especially victims of crimes. I think that those experiences, people working with people that were kidnapped or people who lost loved ones violently and suddenly, seeing their pain and really wanting to do whatever I possibly could to help them, feel comfortable within themselves again and finding their joy again. So that was really the driving factor for me in terms of why did I take every single evidence-based trauma training that existed? Like that's why, So there was like a lot of like in the beginning of my career, I guess there was a lot of searching and understanding and looking for answers. And, I have to say that I feel like I have found a lot of those answers. And whereas before, what you're saying, like, what was it that created the momentum for me? It was bearing witness to the pain and wanting to help, which led to a lot of searching. And now I'm happy to say that I feel really confident that when I do see someone new, and even when their story takes my breath away, the next thought is, I know exactly what I can do to help this person, And so that's very gratifying.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's such a place to be, I think, like not that it's like, oh, I'm done learning, I'm done growing, right? Like, because we're always evolving. But it's such a great place to land in being like, I have this skill. It's that confidence, it's that belief, that faith that like I know what I'm doing and I know that I'm capable of helping somebody through this process. That's such a cool place to land. And I think I've had those moments too where it's like somebody new comes and you're like, I got them. I got you. We got this, and it's starting to breed that belief in them that you're helping them create that new vision, which is really cool that you get to do that. And I think that's helpful for any aspiring therapist listening or social worker or mental health counselor that wherever they end up going to have that, okay, there's going to be a point in my career where I am going to take all the classes, do all the things, take all the trainings where it's going to be beneficial because it's going to build that confidence within me that I can really do well at this.
Yeah, like, having a beginner's mind is really important, So having that in the beginning led to a lot of searching, led to a lot of education. But even though, I'm pretty seasoned at this point, um, and even though I have a lot of confidence, I still say to myself, make sure that you still have the beginner's mind, because it does help to look at every single client with that beginner's mind, making too many assumptions is not very good either. But that's something that you have to learn with time as well.
Being curious, right? Just really like, oh, I want to get to know this person and allow them to feel safe in my space and allow them to be vulnerable and grow through it and be in there with them. Like I think that's just a beautiful part of being a provider, which is it's very clear and evident that you have that piece within you. And I mean, having a practice of many other clinicians underneath you that trust that you are their leader, which is so cool. Such a beautiful, beautiful spot to be.
Well, we have a lot and even though I technically own the practice,
Yeah.
with my business partner, right? We have a really power sharing model at our company in this similar way that I would want to have with one of my clients too, So even though like on paper there's, Nicole Edwards and Diane Webb that own the practice, we really tried to have an egalitarian feel to the company too. Um, But it is something that we value at the practice overall is, meeting people where they're at, really taking a look at individualized care, and again, not assuming anything about the person that walks into your door. Like, even though this client might, seem just like this one that you had a year ago, doesn't mean there's anything similar, then they seem like this, a similar person, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. There's times where I will be like, gosh, I've had like multiple intakes at once, right? And then you're like, they are so similar. Their ages are similar, their stories are similar. And it's like, okay, wait, but I have to really be individual with each of them. And that's
Right, exactly. Yeah,
hard.
it's tricky. That's
Yeah.
actually a lot more tricky than you might think. It's just making sure because the brain wants to categorize, right? So the brain will naturally try to categorize people you're working with too. And it's really important that you keep that in check. Not just you, I mean, in general, all of
Yeah.
us therapists, to keep it in check so that we don't start making assumptions or filling in the blanks. We always want to be, completely open, learning, and not thinking that this will work for this person just because it worked for that person. It's a slippery slope.
I agree 100%, 100%. And on the flip side too, something that I recently like dawned on me the other day in working with a relatively new client. Um, we're chatting and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a tool that I haven't used with somebody in such a long time. And just being able to pull that out and give that to them and support them and work through it with them. It's funny how when the brain does do that thing of sort of trying to categorize it, it actually can be used to our advantage too, of saying that, wait a minute, this is a similar situation I had 2 years ago. I can give this same tool to this person and
Right.
so, and it that takes time, like you're saying. It just takes practice.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so so cool. So, I'm interested too a little bit more about you as a leader. And do you provide continuing education credits? Do you provide any of your own trainings for your not just your therapist within your practice, but also outside of that, especially within New York, because I know that is something that, we are here for it with the CEUs.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we all need our continuing education credits on an ongoing basis,
Yeah.
being licensed providers. But in-house, we do a tremendous amount of support and supervision. So people with a limited permit as therapists who are brand new, they get weekly supervisions with us. Myself or Nicole, my partner, our clinical director, and then we have like a team of clinical supervisors at the practice now. We also have weekly group supervisions together. So since I specialize in trauma, I'm training the whole team on trauma on a regular basis. Our clinical director trains on children and families, so work with family systems and with children. And Nicole does training on couples counseling. She's a phenomenal couples counselor. So we do that on a rotated basis. And we also have case consultations, as a practice together. We are in a position now. Because we've grown so much that we would like to provide continuing education credits so that we can help the process of our therapists in our community to be able to do that. So that's something that we're exploring now. Aside from that, I would love to share what I've learned with other therapists about helping trauma survivors to manifest. And so that might be something that in my abundance of free time, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but at some point I would love to share some of that with people, who are interested in that type of work.
Yeah. And I think just for even if that's not a niche that somebody's going down, I've done a lot of trauma work in other various roles that I've been in, and it does come in handy a lot when I'm working with somebody that has experienced something, even if that's not the ultimate reason why they came to start seeing me. However, that isn't something that I think I'm we do manifestation work, but not in way of traumatic blocks and things of that nature. And so I think that's not something I'm necessarily exploring currently as going into as a niche. However, I think it's important to know as a provider what you do, that that does exist, and that if, especially being in New York, right, if there is somebody I'm working with that could benefit working with you through that or with somebody in your practice or just knowing the information, I think is so helpful in a networking purpose, but also just to know, right? I think it's so important to keep that growth mindset that you were speaking to a few minutes ago of being able to look at everything as a newbie and just like what can I learn here? How can I be open-minded of what this person might be better to receive than with me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm always looking for that because I think is in the private side, right? It's important that we are taking different CEUs to help us grow in anything. But if I'm going to do it, I want to do it that it's going to be beneficial for me and my evolution as a provider, not just, oh, let me take this thing because I got to take it. It's like if I've got to take the time away from seeing clients, away from my family, I want it to be something that is going to actually be super helpful to my career and to my patients. So I think that's such an important piece. And I would love to hear about that when you do that, because I will certainly be willing to sit in on that conversation and that lesson. So please keep me posted on any of those. And as
Yeah.
you expand on providing that to the community, I think I am looking into that as well, because I think if there's a shared ability to do that, together as providers, it's just a really good benefit for everybody. So,
Yeah. Agreed. Definitely.
yeah, perfect. So beautiful. What is a way that we can find you on social media platforms, or ways that people can reach out if they're like, I really want to get to know you more, or perhaps there's a position open in your practice that they want to apply for, or it's somebody that said, oh my goodness, my mom or my sister needs to come see you because they've been through something really traumatic and you would be a great provider for them. How can we find you?
Sure. So our practice is with Grace Mental Health Counseling, and my clinical work can be found on our website. It's www.gracemhc.com. On social media, I sometimes do a lot of education on social media about trauma and manifestation. Of course, on the intersection between the two, just like we were talking about today. People can find me on Facebook by my name, Diane Webb. On TikTok, I am Diane Webb Therapy on there. Yeah, that's how people can find me.
Beautiful. And I will be sure to, in the show notes, put all of that information so people can just click and find you, which I think is just easier. But I like that you're able to say that so they can hear it and know where to go, and it's resonating with them of how to find you. And beautiful. Anything else that you have specific to manifestation and trauma that you wanted to share with us?
Like a final nugget type deal.
I do have one more question of final nugget,
Okay.
but I wanted to leave it specific to that because I know that's like your jam. And I just didn't know if there was anything more you wanted to say on that specific.
Well, I guess I'll pull from a recent conversation I had recently. Like, I guess one thing I would say, for anyone listening is there's a lot of emphasis on not thinking about the past in terms of creating something new for the future. And I will say, having taken a front row seat to the mind and how it operates in helping people to manifest, I would say that's not good advice. I think it's really good to look back and say, how have my past experiences created the lens that I'm looking through today? Right. And if it has changed that lens that you're looking through, then you look at how that happened to create your new lens. I hope that is understandable.
Yeah. So good. So good. I completely agree. We can't really move forward if we don't understand where we're at, right? So that's so huge. So lastly, aside from that, just overall, what if there was a message that you wanted to share with the world today that is on your heart, that maybe people just need to hear, what would you share? What is a phrase, a saying, a word that you just feel like sharing today?
One thing that I share with my clients a lot is manifestation is an energy that is always available to you, no matter what happened to you, right? So if you went through something really horrific, really horrible, or a series of things or years of something that was really traumatic, it doesn't mean that manifestation is not available to you. It's available all along. And the work is, if it's available or not, the real work is how to help yourself become into alignment with the energy that is manifestation.
Oh, good. I love that. I needed that today. So I
Oh,
appreciate it.
good. Well, there you go.
Well, thank you so much for this. I think this is just it's good to start the conversation about this stuff because I don't, like we said before we started recordings, this isn't something that people talk about. Manifestation energy, it can feel woo to people, especially when somebody has been through a traumatic experience. They don't know that that is something possible for them to live a whole new life after that. So I'm so grateful that we've crossed paths, and I hope we continue to. And I am looking forward to just seeing you grow, the people within your practice grow, learning more about that, and maybe even attending some classes to get credits and learn from you. So
It
beautiful.
was great to meet you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm going to wrap up there, guys, but please feel free to start following Diane on all social media platforms. And if you or somebody you know is interested in working with her in any capacity, reach out. So thank you.